I'm going to start by giving a little bit of context about what we mean by employee experience, and then give you my thoughts on the 5 key areas of EX that I think is important to focus on right now, before passing over to Michael to talk about culture and the tech. So obviously there are lots of definitions of employee experience. I particularly like the one that says that it encapsulates what people encounter, observe and feel over the course of their employee journey at an organisation. And we're obviously not going to go through the separate touch points of the life cycle today, but that's also a factor. For those of you who've read Jacob Morgan, you'll know that he describes these 3 factors that make up employee experience as being the physical environment, the technology that's used, and the culture that's lived. And Josh Bersin describes it broadly as the integrated experience that impacts daily life in and outside of the workplace. So whilst I don't see employee experience as being quite as broad a topic as company culture, it's definitely impacted by what your current culture is. And although in this current pandemic situation, you may think, well, there's little that an employer can do to control people's physical work environment, and that's true to some extent, it's also an important factor. So bearing in mind what people's environment is like at home is also important for the employer to think about. Another thing to note on Bersin's description is how it refers to how employees feel inside and outside of their actual workplace and working hours, but as a result of the experience that they encounter whilst they're at work, which makes sense when you look at things like stress or exhaustion or happiness or fulfillment. And even before the crisis, these things didn't stop when people finished their working day. It affected their whole life. But now that people are doing everything from home, the potential for carrying work issues into your whole life is even more pronounced. So as an employer, you need to think about what your employee's life experience is like at the moment as a result of being your employee. So what makes up employee experience? So really, it's things like how aligned you feel to the purpose and values of an organisation, whether you think it's a fair and inclusive place to work that treats people with respect, whether you're given the right technology tools and upskilled enough to do your job, whether you're given the right amount of autonomy, empowerment and flexibility to perform. Like we mentioned, what the physical environment is like, and how much the business cares about your personal and professional development. It's also about the leadership team. How aligned are they? Do they say what they're going to do? And also about customer experience. How your customers or your suppliers or your partners are treated by the organisation also feeds into that. It's also about how well the organisation listens to its employees, and how much the employees get to contribute to any decisions that are made, especially when those decisions directly impact them. And as we know, it's also about how people are recognised and rewarded, how much they feel the company cares for their general well-being, and about how relationships are built and teams are supported and managed. And in this particular pandemic situation, obviously, it's also about the experience for employees that are furloughed. If your people have a continuously good employee experience, especially at those milestone moments or key parts of the life cycle, then they're likely to stay working for you. They'll be more engaged, motivated, productive, and committed to help you achieve the company goals and bring your customer experience to life. Pre the crisis, Gartner had a statistic that said that the next couple of years, 81% of businesses will compete mostly on customer experience. And if you pair that with Simon Sinek's quote that customers will never love a company until the employees love it first, you can see why focusing on the experience of your people you have working for you needs to be a priority. 5 areas I want to go through. So number 1 is really about what I call reigniting the culture assets. You know, somewhere you've got your purpose or your mission and your values clearly articulated, I'm sure, but in all the chaos and firefighting, I'm finding that these things seem to have been pushed aside. Now is really the time to get them back out again. So if you start with the purpose or the mission, you know, employees are much happier when they're working towards, and they work at their best, in fact, when they're working towards that shared purpose or the common goal. For those of you who've read, you know, Start With Why by Simon Sinek, I'm sure you've seen that as well. But it's about realigning them to that purpose. And if your company purpose or your mission is kind of strong and it resonates with people, then use that. And if it doesn't, don't be fearful of kind of bringing it down a notch. What's the purpose for your team, for your division, for your department? It's what Dan Pink calls purpose with a small p. And it's really that, why are we here? What's our team here to do? You know, are we here to ensure that our staff are treated fairly, keep them physically and mentally well? Are we here to ensure that, you know, the customers are satisfied, or to serve our community? You know, what is it? It might be as simple as, if you're the payroll team, your purpose is simply to ensure that people get paid on time, you know, the right amount of money on the right day, etc. So what is it? So what's that purpose? So get people back aligned to what they're there to do. That way they can start to align their own roles with that bigger purpose. It's much more motivating, as well as much easier for them to kind of perform when they understand the clear goal or objective. And then the other one is obviously the values and behaviours. And again, we've seen a lot of slippage with clients, and people are in firefighting mode, and we'll go into that in a minute. But it's important to kind of bring them back to the table. You need to keep them alive. It's not so easy to focus on your company values when you're sitting at home in your pajama bottoms panicking about whether you're going to lose your job or not. So bringing that back to the forefront of people's mind and reinforcing them with ensuring that they're factored into the decisions that are being made, into the interaction that you have both within the team and externally with clients, customers, partners, etc. I always say that technology should be the enabler for your culture and not the driver. And there's a real danger, I feel, in this period that we're so busy rolling out tech tools to aid productivity and collaboration without kind of setting the ground rules or anchoring them back to the values. The tech becomes a driver for the way that people behave. And Michael might talk a little bit more about this point a bit later. So my second point is really about leading and acting with empathy. I think it's really important to remember that we're only human. People are struggling to cope with whatever the situation means for them, whether that's juggling work with homeschooling or caring for relatives or, working in a small bedroom in a shared house with 6 other people. It's really important to bear that in mind and not think about the process and the policy too much. There was one quote, and I don't know who said this actually, I don't misquote them, but one quote that I really like to say that, people are not remote working. They're staying at home during a crisis and trying to work. And I think that's so true, right? This is not the ideal scenario. This is not what it would be under different circumstances, but people are doing their best. I'm sure everyone's seen the Kubler-Ross change curve a number of times, but if you bear in mind that this is a big change, many people are grieving for the lives they used to have. They have to deal with this change that we're going through very quickly. So I think most people have managed to get over the shock and denial phase, but most of them are not really at acceptance, and they're sitting somewhere in that emotional part, emotional stress part at the bottom of the curve, moving sort of slightly up and down it. And so they're fearful for losing their jobs. They've got financial worries, and that whole piece on kind of just remembering that they're human. There's three quick tips on on managing this, if you like. I think it's really important to meet people at the place on the curve where they are and not the place where you are. So I see a lot of people, especially management, saying, well, we have to get through this. We've already started focusing on the next phase. What happens when we come out of this? What does the new world order look like? And actually, I had some people trolling me this week on that same point. It's like, stop focusing on the here and now and focus on 3 months down the line. And the point is that people aren't ready for that. So most people aren't ready for that. So meet them where they're at and help them there. The other quick tip is listen to try and understand, practice empathic listening. Are people really okay? What do they need? What's going on for them? Are there more tools that they could do with? Is there more training that they need? Do they need to be partnered with somebody else? One employee at a client was telling us they live on their own, and actually they've been gate crashing other people's conference calls just so to have someone to talk to. And the third tip is to reset the expectations of the work that people need to deliver. It's very unlikely that people are going to deliver the same amount that they would have before during this phase. So agree what those new expectations are and make sure they're realistic. And this will ensure that people are as productive and positive as they can be. And if you really haven't got time, we've had pushback on this where managers say, well, I haven't got time to talk to people. I haven't got time for one-to-one. So the more you can gather using tech again as a kind of aggregator and then go back to the people that are struggling, in the form of pulse surveys or feedback over WhatsApp or even Alexa, or if you're holding town halls over something like GoToWebinar or LearnAmp, you can ask people to raise questions anonymously if they don't want to be identified. But I guess my point is there are lots of options for how to get this, but it's just important to listen and to act on people's concerns. I think there's a real sort of judgment phase now going on from an employee experience perspective. The way that employers behave now in terms of supporting employees will have an impact long into the future of your employer brand and therefore your ability to attract and retain talent when we come out the other side of this. So it's really important to focus, so that they don't feel like they're just collateral damage in an essential business process, I guess. In terms of positive and negative examples of this, we've seen both. I've seen some shocking behavior where people have been treated badly, and one was in a downsizing recently where people found out whether they still had a job or not by the whole team being sent a PDF of org chart at the same time and told to look for their names. And then other ones with furloughed staff, sort of literally, long tenure, but then being frog marched off the premises, the immediate effect without even a thank you or a goodbye. But then on the other side, we've seen lots of positives, teams that have had to implement salary cuts, but have said, listen, we're going to treat this like a loan to the business. And when we're back up and running again, you'll be paid back in your monthly salary. Or people finding volunteering and training opportunities for furlough staff to better their skills and job prospects on the other side, even if they're not going back to that particular employer. So on my third point really is then about trust and empowering your people. And we've had lots of debates with clients on this. And one of the things I realized is, remote working does require a high degree of trust. A lot of managers are not there on that trust curve, I think, and they're not happy believing that people are working unless they can see them. And I do appreciate that there are some businesses where you may need that level of oversight and you may need to know what people are doing at various times of day, and there may be tasks that need to be tracked. But there's a level of remote micromanagement that's going on that I just don't think is necessary. The whole team needing to be on early morning video calls, dressed for work, or tracking on collaboration tools in terms of time and attendance given to certain tasks. Apparently on Zoom, you can track how much time participants spend actually looking at the camera and paying attention, which I just think is unnecessary. Unless it's really essential for your business, I think you'll get much more from people if you make their expectations clear and trust them to deliver. That said, I think some routine is good. We all need a bit of routine. If you've got children at home, I'm sure you've put some kind of a timetable together for their schooling. Whether it's being stuck to or not is another question. But it's helpful for people to know that there is a routine going on, even if they can't join at every point. So if there is the morning briefing, that's at the same time every day, that's fine. And if you know what time clients and colleagues are available, that's good. But rather than a rigid routine, we've seen this calling routine with flex works much better. And the more you can video those meetings or get somebody to kind of circulate the update so that people aren't missing out, it just lessens the pressure of feeling like I have to make it to that meeting, even though I've got this other thing going on right now. And empowering people to set boundaries for their work life. This was important before, but I think it just wasn't so pronounced. But people's boundaries are now more blurred than ever. There isn't even the commute to and from the office to kind of create that line. You don't have to be somewhere else. You don't have to be home for the kids or be at your gym class. And so there's an increase in what Dr. Vanessa Moulton is calling leavism, which is a term coined to describe the struggle that people have leaving work at work, taking holiday and separating their home life from their work life. So helping people to recognize this in themselves and kind of empowering them to create those boundaries for themselves is going to help them to perform to the best of their ability. Number 4 is really about building a sense of community, a sense of belonging, sort of a basic human need. How do you build that inclusive, we're all in this together feeling when there are so many different dynamics to factor in? As humans, we're always looking for what have we got in common with other people? What makes us similar? What makes us part of the same group? And that's much harder to do when you don't have regular face-to-face contact. There are a few quick things that I think you can do. One of them is allow people to still play to their strengths. There's a danger in crisis mode that, half the team are furloughed and the other half of the team have got to pick up all the work, that people are doing things that just don't play to their strengths at all, or they've never done before. And there may need to be an element of this, little bits of it, but trying to push people into jobs that aren't their skill set at all is tricky. And I think people need to feel like they're good at what they do and they are their authentic selves to feel that they also belong. There are some tools that you can use for that as well. I don't know if you've ever used the Game Changer Index or Strength Finder assessment, but that kind of figuring out where people are going to add the most impact and have the most impact and add the most contribution as a remote team player is key at this point. The second point is just ensuring that your management and communication style are inclusive. When you see people face to face, this is much easier because you can gauge pretty quickly whether somebody's disengaged or you've lost them. But are you speaking to the introverts and the extroverts? Are you speaking to people with kids at home and those living alone? As in, your messaging, not are you physically speaking to them, but is your messaging resonating with these people? Are you allowing for the fact that some people are really comfortable to learn 4 new software packages in a week, and others are not. So just having that kind of inclusive leader hat on the whole time, is everybody going to feel that they're included in this message that I'm giving out? And one of the last things that helps with the community is really about having a bit of fun. I'm quite impressed to see how well people have embraced this, actually. But the more sort of shared activities and light-hearted non-work experiences you can have as a team, the better. There are lots of the sort of the 5-minute quizzes, the shared movie night, the let's have a pub night on a Friday, assuming that it's inclusive, that everybody drinks, obviously, has worked really well. So the more kind of non-work interactions you can have with your work team, the better. And then my last point is really probably on the biggie, I guess, the employee well-being, the physical and mental health side. I mentioned earlier that some people, everybody's on that change curve somewhere, basically, but some people will actually be experiencing trauma from how much their life has been turned upside down in such a short time frame. So that's really important to factor in, how are they coping with this? From the physical exercise standpoint, obviously it's hard for you to monitor, but I think encouraging your teams to do as much as they can do, as much regular movement. There are lots of team yoga classes that I've seen, or people, tracking the miles run, miles cycled, or any kind of gamifying of exercise works really well. But again, I'll leave Michael to talk about that more. But even some very simple movement, or getting up every hour to do your standard kind of 5 or 10 minute walk around, will at least reduce the amount of cortisol, stress hormone, that they've got in their system. It's also worth considering, someone mentioned the other day that, technically employers are still liable for things like, health and safety and kind of the ergonomics of your desk setup and stuff, even though you're working from home. But obviously it's pretty unrealistic at the moment to think that that's going to be a priority or be happening over Zoom calls. But it is worth just mentioning again to people, where are you sitting? What's your setup? Keeping them moving, making sure that their backs are protected, there's no kind of repetitive strain injury or any other type of injury. And then from a mental health perspective, there are 2 camps. There's really people that have mental health conditions, who should be proactively checked on by their manager or by mental health first aiders if you've got them. I know some clients have set up a kind of hotline to counsellors if that's required, but that can really help. And then there's kind of the majority where you're just trying to keep them on track and prevent them from developing any sort of mental health issues. And obviously the exercise will help, being part of the community will definitely help, being connected. And then beyond this, any form of meditation or mindfulness or simple breathing techniques will help to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system to enable them to feel more relaxed and quiet, and the inner voice that's probably going on in most people's head right now. Just as a quick aside, we're going to have a special webinar on 23rd of April, a wellbeing special with some mindfulness and Qigong techniques included. But in the meanwhile, there are lots of apps, Headspace, Calm, Breather, that are all really good to find that space in their heads, I guess. And you also need the leaders and the managers in the business to be showing the way, not just by talking about these points, but also by doing this themselves. So it's a classic that managers will say, you need to, do mindfulness, but I'm just going to work around the clock to keep everything going. So, ensure that they are walking the talk as well. So, I was just going to tell you one other quick story. Actually, another client implemented quite something that I thought was quite good, which was called worry time. So just having that kind of 25 minutes as a team where you kind of have the outward panic, what ifs, get everything they're stressed about out of their system so that they don't need to think about it for the rest of the day. And I thought that was quite good. But anyway, so just before I pass over to Michael, I just wanted to make one closing point in that whatever you can do with your employee experience to help people over this time is, it's crucial. And whatever you design or whatever you manage to kind of keep alive from the experience that was already happening in the office, don't forget that you're going to need your managers to drive this. And I think it's important not to assume that they already have the tools and the skills and the confidence to effectively lead the remote team and look after their people. So just bear in mind that there might be some accelerated development that's needed for managers to get them to where they need to be. Just wanted to spend a few minutes on the critical yet sensitive group who've been furloughed. It's really, really important for these people to feel connected and engaged with the business, even though they're not working. Even if if companies are thinking that they won't necessarily go back to their organization, I mean, hopefully they will, but even if they're not, I think just that helping these people feel, again, back to the purpose, they don't have a purpose necessarily at the moment. So what am I connected to? What's my driver? So just that kind of keeping them updated on company news and progress, giving them opportunities for two-way conversations. So again, listening, but giving them an opportunity to voice their concerns. Thinking about any opportunities that you can provide for learning and development. They're all able to do that. And any volunteering that I mentioned earlier that may help their career in the long run. If you do want them to return to active duties in your organisation, then you want them to be as engaged as possible and hit the ground running. So, using this time for upping their sort of, productivity skills and performance is crucial. There are lots of tools out there, but we have a technology partner that has a learning experience platform and communication tool that are offering a package specifically for furloughed staff that works really well. So that's another thing. If you want to talk to us after the call, then feel free. So now, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Michael Down, who is CEO of Culture.
Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. I'm going to be showing a couple of slides. For those of you who are listening, probably need to look at your screens because there's going to be quite a lot of images to look at. And I am the founder and the CEO of a company called Culture. We have an app of the same name. And I'd like to share with you what we've done in the last few weeks. So when the coronavirus started coming and we had our clients realizing that they had to shut down their offices and had people work from home, everyone realized very quickly that they were going to need to get everyone up and running on Microsoft Teams and Zoom and Slack and whatever it might be. But there was still a concern of how to keep them motivated and engaged after they have started to use all of these tools. So as a result of that, Culture is a culture activation app. So we basically help take desired behaviors to action. And we created a campaign called Work From Home that runs in our app and is running with our clients right now. So briefly, Culture, what we are trying to do is to work on the hypothesis that we change behavior by the observation of other people's behaviors. So we basically imitate the behavior of our peers around us, whether that is colleagues and other things. So we have an app that nudges people to do small things, tiny things. We call them mini missions. And we ask the users to take a picture or video of that and share that internally within the organization. And in this case, when it comes to work from home, we identified 4 different themes or objectives that, according to our experience and the clients that we have, would be very useful to try to nudge or see more of for the people who work from home. And in each of these themes, there are challenges in the app with mini missions connected to them. So the 4 different objectives and themes that we have in the app for this campaign corresponds slightly to, or I hope a lot, to some of those issues that were being raised before, such as motivation, visibility, connecting with people, not feeling isolated, and building a community. So the first theme is focusing on and productivity, but not in the sense of using the fantastic collaboration tools that are out there, but more how to be nudged to have to take action on the routines and habits that we know that we should have in order to be able to get a better work-life blend, if not balance, and try to reduce the distraction from homes. It's about keeping up with the team, so doing what everyone can for everyone else in the team by thinking of what's important and not just using the project management tools that we have or the task lists or anything, but as individuals, what can we do for our teams? Of course, a big thing of this is replacing the kind of fun that we have in being with each other in the office. So how can we replace that? How can we build a community? How can we feed our workplace culture, even if we're not at the workplace? And then we also have bits of staying healthy, which is not in the way that it's a fitness app. It's much more targeting to the small things that might trigger or nudge people who are doing less than being super fit in order to get things done. This campaign that we are running is running over 6 weeks. And it has these four themes running with different challenges. that keeps being updated. So there's always something that goes on and keeps the energy and engagement levels high. So as an example, what these mini missions could be like, here's just a sample of what we have in it. So for the theme and objective of focus on productivity, we have mini missions on having people reflecting on and sharing what they think is the biggest distractions and share that with their colleagues. It's things that are highlighting the positive sides of things and share those as well. It's coming up with ideas and sharing ideas and taking action on ideas of how to find your work-life balance or blend. And it's also thinking about productivity in other ways than you see in other tools. So is your backdrop the one that you want to have when you have video calls? For keeping up with teamwork, we have mini missions such as 1 hour CCC, which is call your colleagues and customers. Remember that the phone is still an important tool to build relationships. It's being a team player and sending energy to your teammates. It's also being clear of when you are available and not, so that people don't get disappointed when you're not answering. It's on the fun and belonging stuff. The tool we have, it can be a real factory of fun and jokes and other things, which we do think is important. But it's also on the more transparency side of things and opening up people to what they really are about. So we have a mission called This Is My Work From Home Office to give a broader picture of where the person is. There's a bucket list mission, for example, and there's a lot more than this, but also opening up to more what people are and more than the professional role. And then we have similar stuff for staying healthy. These are mini missions. These are not asking people to commit to big goals, but just doing small goals to get them active. And what this does then is that it results in all these kinds of actions happening and people sharing that. So this is my work from my office. Here's just 2 examples, so that when you have someone on a video call, you'll see what kind of environment that they're in. You might even laugh about this and you know more about this person. Have a salad for lunch is a mission that may actually get some to take a little bit more care of what they actually eat, because it's about them showing off to other people or sharing that with other people. We have the bucket list mission, which is a wonderful way of people sitting at home, still being very personal about what's going on, what they want to do. And it creates that kind of personal community that goes beyond the professional tasks, especially when you don't really have those sharing personal things on your Zoom calls. We're also using other technologies in a way to just grab attention to that we actually gathered, and here's what we did. So share those moments and make them be even more visible within the company, what happened and with who. And then what the app does is it creates hundreds of these small mini stories that creates a kind of experience of what you and your company and your team or organization has. So it's a full feed of just perpetuating the workplace culture or the employee experience, that everyone feels that here's a big community, we're part of this, this is who we are, and it kind of manifests or try to boost the culture and the experience that we get as an employee.